Under the dim glow of the moonlight streaming through the curtains, I found myself pressed against the cold wall, breath hitching as I realized how far things had gone. This was the breaking point. The line we had crossed was buried in the past now, and there was no turning back. "Jessica, this is madness," he whispered, his voice laced with regret, but his grip still firm around my wrist. It was a plea, a warning, and a confession all at once, but I couldn't stop. Not now, not after everything that had already happened. "Let me take you back to the beginning. Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm 26 years old, living in San Francisco, and for the longest time my life was simple, predictable, even boring. I worked as a marketing consultant, had a small group of friends, and attended family gatherings like everyone else. That's where it all started, one of those seemingly innocent family get-togethers that changed the course of my life forever. Enter Ryan. He's my cousin, but not the type you see often. We were close as kids, but grew apart as we grew older, each carving out different paths in life. He's now 32, married to a wonderful woman named Claire, and the picture of success. He had it all: wealth, charisma, a happy family. But behind those perfect smiles at holiday dinners, I saw something different. I saw the glances he shot my way when he thought no one was looking, the lingering touches that seemed almost accidental. At first, I thought I was imagining it, reading too much into fleeting moments, but those moments turned into something much darker. The first time it happened, it was late. Everyone had left the party except us. We were cleaning up the kitchen, Claire upstairs putting their baby to sleep. Ryan was pouring himself a drink, offering me one with a casual smile. We sat at the kitchen island, talking about life, reminiscing about our childhood. Everything felt so normal until it wasn't. He moved closer, his hand resting on my knee. I remember freezing, looking into his eyes and seeing a storm brewing there, something intense and dangerous. Before I could react, his lips were on mine. It was electric. I pushed him away, but the damage was done. The spark had already been lit, and the fire spread faster than we could control. From that night on, everything was different. We exchanged secret texts, met in hidden corners at family events, and made excuses to be alone together. It felt like a drug, intoxicating and addictive. But as thrilling as it was, there was always that underlying tension, the fear of being caught, the knowledge that what we were doing was forbidden. One night, after another family gathering, I couldn't take it anymore. The guilt, the secrecy, it was tearing me apart. I went to his house, fully intending to end it, to tell him that we couldn't do this anymore. But when I arrived, he was alone. Claire had taken the baby to visit her parents for the weekend. The moment I stepped through the door, it was like the floodgates opened. He poured me into the bathroom, the safest place in the house where no one could see us. The steam from his shower still clung to the air, making the room feel suffocating. I could feel the heat radiating from his body as he pressed me against the cold tile wall, his hands gripping my waist like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. "Jessica, we can't keep doing this," he said, but his actions betrayed his words as his lips found my neck. It was a desperate, hungry kiss, like he was trying to pour every ounce of his regret and longing into it. I pushed him back, looking him in the eyes. "Then why don't you stop?" I challenged, my voice shaky but determined. He looked at me, raw emotion flashing across his face, and for a moment, I thought he would let go, that he would finally make the right choice. But then he kissed me again, harder this time, and I knew we were both lost. The nights that followed were a blur of secret meetings and whispered promises. We were playing with fire and we knew it, but the danger only made it more thrilling. Every time we were together, it was like the world outside ceased to exist, but the guilt was suffocating. I could barely look Claire in the eye, knowing what I was doing behind her back. One evening, everything came crashing down. We were at a family barbecue, the tension between us palpable. Claire was there, laughing, completely oblivious to the storm brewing right under her nose. At one point, I caught Ryan staring at me from across the yard, his eyes dark with an emotion I couldn't decipher. It was as if he was daring me to do something, to make a move. I walked inside to get some fresh air, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard footsteps behind me and turned around, expecting to see my mother or maybe one of my cousins. But it was Claire. She looked at me with a strange, knowing smile, and my stomach dropped. "Jessica," she said, her voice calm but cold. "We need to talk." And that was the moment I realized she knew. She had known for a while. I could see it in her eyes. The betrayal, the hurt, the fury masked behind a thin veil of composure. My world shattered right then, every secret and lie coming to the surface, and there was no place left to hide. The confrontation that followed was explosive. Claire wasn't the type to yell, but her words cut deeper than any scream ever could. Ryan walked in halfway through, his face pale as a ghost. He tried to speak, to explain, but she held up her hand, silencing him. "I trusted you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Both of you." I couldn't say anything. What could I say? I had betrayed her in the worst way possible, and there was no excuse that could make it right. Ryan chose to stay with Claire. They went to couples counseling, tried to piece together the shattered remnants of their marriage. I was left on the outside, the villain in a story I never intended to write. It's been a year since that day, and I still think about him. I still replay those moments, wondering what would have happened if we had made different choices. But I know now that some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. I've moved away, started fresh in a new city, but the memories linger like a shadow I can't escape. Maybe I'll never be able to, and maybe that's the price I have to pay for what we did. This is my story. It's not pretty, and it doesn't have a happy ending, but it's the truth. As I sit here now, staring out at the skyline of my new city, it feels like a different world. I've tried to bury the past, to move on from the chaos we created, but the memories have a way of resurfacing, especially in the quiet moments when I'm alone with my thoughts. I can still feel the weight of his hands on me, the rush of adrenaline that coursed through my veins every time we were together. It's a feeling I can't seem to shake, no matter how hard I try. The first time it happened, it felt like an out-of-body experience. We were alone in the kitchen, the summer sun casting a golden hue through the window, making everything seem almost dreamlike. Ryan was standing so close, his body brushing against mine as he reached over to grab something from the top shelf. I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his skin. I knew it was wrong. He was Claire's husband, my cousin's partner. But when his hand lingered on mine, when he turned to look at me with those piercing blue eyes, something inside me snapped. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, almost a whisper. I could see the hesitation, the conflict in his gaze, but there was something else there too, a hunger, a longing that mirrored my own. I'm fine, I stammered, but I wasn't. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. I should have pulled away, stepped back, anything but what I did next. Instead, I found myself leaning in, closing the distance between us until I could feel his breath on my lips. We kissed. It was hesitant at first, like we were both testing the waters, but then it deepened, and suddenly we were all over each other. I'd never felt anything like it before. It was as if every nerve in my body was on fire, every inch of my skin electrified by his touch. I knew we were crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed, but in that moment, I didn't care. "I've wanted this for so long," he murmured against my lips, his voice filled with a raw honesty that made my knees go weak. I pulled back, staring at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking, that this was all just a sick fantasy I'd conjured up in my head. But the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world, told me everything I needed to know. From that day on, everything changed. We couldn't keep our hands off each other. Every time Claire left the room, every time we found ourselves alone, the air between us would crackle with unspoken tension. It was intoxicating, exhilarating, but also terrifying. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone noticed, before everything came crashing down around us. One evening, I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch a movie while my mind raced with thoughts of him. Claire was in the kitchen, chatting on the phone with a friend, oblivious to the storm brewing just a few feet away. Ryan came up behind me, his hands slipping around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, fast and erratic, matching my own. "Meet me upstairs in 5 minutes, he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. I nodded, barely able to breathe as he stepped away, leaving me there trembling with anticipation. I waited, counting down the seconds until I could slip away without raising suspicion. When I finally made it upstairs, he was already there, waiting for me. He pulled me into the bedroom, shutting the door behind us, and kissed me with a desperation that took my breath away. "I can't keep doing this," I gasped, breaking the kiss long enough to catch my breath. "I know," he replied, but there was no conviction in his voice. His hands were already pulling at my clothes, his lips trailing hot kisses down my neck. "But I can't stop." Neither could I. It was like an addiction, one I couldn't seem to quit no matter how hard I tried. We fell onto the bed, a tangle of limbs and raw, unfiltered desire. I knew it was wrong. Every fiber of my being screamed screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but I couldn't. I was in too deep, caught up in a whirlwind of emotions I didn't know how to control. Afterward, we lay there in silence, the reality of what we'd done settling over us like a heavy fog. I turned to look at him, tears welling up in my eyes. "What are we doing, Ryan?" I whispered, my voice cracking with the weight of my guilt. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, his expression filled with a sadness I hadn't seen before. "I don't know," he admitted quietly, "but I know that I can't stay away from you." Neither could I. Even as I lay there, tears streaming down my cheeks, I knew that this wasn't the end. We were caught in a vicious cycle, one we couldn't seem to break no matter how hard we tried. The weeks that followed were a blur of secret meetings, stolen glances, and whispered confessions. We became experts at sneaking around, hiding our affair from everyone, especially Claire. But the guilt was eating me alive. Every time I saw her smile, every time she kissed Ryan or held his hand, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I knew I had to end it. I couldn't keep living this double life, couldn't keep lying to someone I loved. But every time I tried to pull away, Ryan would pull me back in, telling me he needed me, that he couldn't bear to lose me. And the truth was, I couldn't bear to lose him either. Then came the night everything fell apart. We were at a family barbecue, surrounded by friends and loved ones, and I could feel the tension simmering just beneath the surface. Claire was laughing, completely oblivious, while Ryan and I exchanged heated glances from across the yard. I knew it was risky, knew we were playing with fire, but I couldn't help myself. Later, when everyone else had gone to bed, Ryan and I met outside, hidden away from prying eyes. He kissed me, hard and desperate, and I kissed him back just as fiercely. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. He pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. "We'll figure it out," he promised, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Before I could say anything else, I heard a sound behind us. I turned, and there she was, Claire, standing in the doorway, staring at us with a look of pure devastation on her face. "Claire," I started, but she didn't say a word. She just turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the silence. In that moment, everything shattered. The life I'd built, the lies I'd told, the love I thought I had. It all crumbled into dust. Ryan ran after her, calling her name, but I stayed where I was, frozen in place. I could feel the tears streaming down my face, but I didn't wipe them away. I just stood there, staring into the darkness, knowing that I'd lost everything. I haven't seen them since. I packed up and left the next morning, unable to face the fallout of what we'd done. I've tried to move on, to build a new life, but the guilt still haunts me, lurking in the corners of my mind. And now as I sit here telling you my story, I wonder if I'll ever be free of it, if I'll ever find a way to forgive myself for the choices I made, for the hearts I broke. But for now, all I can do is keep going, one day at a time, hoping that someday the pain will fade. Until then, this is my truth, and I'm finally ready to share it. The finality of that night lingers like a scar that hasn't healed, a wound that reopens every time I allow myself to remember. I left in the early hours, the sun barely peeking over the horizon as I drove away from everything I knew. The quiet roads stretched out before me, and I couldn't help but feel that they mirrored the emptiness inside me. The weight of the betrayal hung over me like a storm cloud, and I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Ryan tried to call me, texted me endlessly, but I couldn't face him. I couldn't face any of them. Claire's devastated expression was the last image I saw before leaving, and it's haunted me ever since. Her eyes, filled with disbelief and heartbreak, play on a loop in my mind. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times, wondering what I could have said, could have done differently. But it's too late now. The damage is done. For months, I stayed away, cutting ties with everyone I once loved. I moved to a different city, took a new job, and tried to start fresh, but no matter how far I ran, the memories followed me. I would see Ryan's face in the crowd, hear Claire's laughter in the echoes of the past. It felt like I was living in the shadow of my former life, unable to escape the guilt that clung to me like a second skin. One day, out of the blue, I received a letter. It was from Claire. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. It was short, painfully so, but every word cut deep. "Jessica, I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you, but I'm trying. I've come to realize that hating you won't heal the wounds or bring back what we lost. I just wanted you to know that I'm moving on. I hope you find a way to do the same." I read the letter over and over again, tears blurring the ink. It was the closest thing to closure I would ever get. I knew then that I had to let go, that holding on to the guilt guilt and shame wasn't serving anyone. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it away, a reminder of the love I once destroyed, and the strength it took for Claire to find her peace. As for Ryan, I haven't spoken to him since. Part of me wants to reach out, to see if there's anything left of what we once had, but I know it's better this way. We were a fire that burned too hot, too fast, and left nothing but ashes in its wake. I've accepted that now. I'm still learning to live with the consequences of my actions, to navigate the world I shattered with my choices. Some days are better than others. There are moments when I almost forget, when I laugh without feeling the pang of regret. But they're fleeting. The past is a heavy thing to carry, but I'm learning to bear it, bit by bit. So this is where my story ends, for now, at least. I don't know what the future holds, if I'll ever find someone who sees past the mistakes I've made, if I'll ever forgive myself fully, but I'm trying. I'm trying every day to be better, to be the person I once was, before everything changed. And maybe that's all I can ask for, to take each day as it comes, to heal a little more with every sunrise, and to finally let go of the shadows of yesterday. For those listening, I can only say this: be careful with your heart, with the hearts of those you love. Sometimes the greatest betrayals come not from malice, but from weakness. And once you cross that line, there's no going back. This is my truth, my confession, and now it's time to close this chapter and let it rest, like a book that's been read too many times. I leave it here, in your hands, hoping that by sharing it, I can find a sliver of peace.